Welcome to NBusiness with Terrell, Sheppard. Once again, yours truly, glad to be back here. All things sports, all things business. Again, we're talking today in that segment, we're going to really deal with the whole area of the business of boxing. That's right, I've talked about this before on this show, and so I'm glad to be back to have this conversation. We'll try to have some call-ins from some insiders. We'll also talk a little bit of what's coming up in the sport. And the last show that I had on the business of boxing, I talked about it in the context of boxers and the unregulated part of the sport, and the fact that, boxers really don't have a union. There's no, guaranteed contracts. You don't have a whole bunch of some of the same scenarios that you have as we talked about in team sports. But boxing has proven to be still on the upper echelon in the higher aspects of boxing. When you talk about individuals, obviously the name that comes to mind to everyone when you talk about the business in the sport of boxing, you talk about Floyd Mayweather, and why not? When you're looking at it from that standpoint of view, Floyd Mayweather, no doubt the highest paid individual in 2018 in all of sports. And so when you look at the fact that Floyd Mayweather has been able to again take the sport of boxing, create a dynamic in such a way where now self-promotion becomes the issue, it gives us a controversy. Is boxing better off because of Floyd Mayweather, or is boxing better when it was run and regulated by the commission, so to speak? In other words, the WBA, the WBC, the IBF, those types of commissions ran boxing, and promoters basically had to, juggle around who had the belt with which commission. And although they were able to promote, they had to kind of promote within the whole aspect of, the belt commissions and who owned those titles. Today, promoters pretty much have free reign because they control the TV contracts, they control the athletes themselves, so they have a different aspect. And then you have the athletes that are now even doing self-promotion. So the belts are no longer as significant as they used to be. And that was going to be my question for today. It doesn't really matter if you are a champion, as it was when I grew up and looking at boxing in the 1980s and the 1990s. It was all about in the Sugar Ray era, in the Tommy Hearns era, in the Pernell Whitaker era, even in the Roy Jones era, in the era of when the Hagler era. Hagler retired from boxing because of the loss he had with Sugar Ray, where he felt he won that fight, and you can argue back and forth who won that fight, but it was a belt that was on the line in the middleweight championship. So belts were significant. They validated the boxer, and therefore it validated boxing because you had a championship symbol to fight around. You had to compete against. Today, it's promotionally run. Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao didn't really fight for a belt. I mean, I think they made up a belt, for Manny Pacquiao to have. And even now, in Manny Pacquiao's fight against Thurman, coming up on July 20th, the fight itself, although there is a belt on the line, Thurman does have a belt in the welterweight division. Manny Pacquiao has a belt. It's really not that significant anymore in terms of if you are a champion, because we have so many belts, because we have so many divisions, because we have so many commissions now. Promoters, I believe, have used this as an advantage. So the question that I have is, boxer better off now, or was it better off back then? 301-429-9247. You can give us a call directly to the show, 301-429-9247. You also can get us right there on Facebook at WBGR Sports Network. Of course, you can get me directly at Terrell Sheppard right there on Facebook. So the idea simply is it a way for us to be able to look at the sport of boxing? Well, in our show, of course, we look at it from a business standpoint of view. Is the business of boxing better off for boxers in general? In other words, is it a better time to be in boxing from a business standpoint of view versus during let's say the Sugar Ray era, during the Hearns era? My position is from a economic standpoint of view, in the upper echelon. In other words, the top 2 or 3 boxers in the weight class, it is a better time for them to be in the sport today. They can, because the sport is set up in such a way where you can now create the kind of fight you want. So I don't have to, during the Sugar Ray era or during those eras, and I keep using that because that was an era, that was what we call the golden era. Before that, you kind of had your Ali, you kind of had, that era of boxing, that had kind of come along right there. Larry Holmes was right there before Sugar Ray, coming right off the Ali era. That kind of era was in place. But I'm talking about the golden era where if you look at the middleweights and the welterweights and the light heavyweights and even in the heavyweight division, this era of competitive boxing was significant. And what you had was during that era of boxing, boxing was also accessible to the people. Okay, so you could watch, for the most part, an up-and-coming boxer, somebody that had some potential to really be great in the next. You can literally see them on television developing until they get to the championship round. I can remember watching Pernell Whitaker before he became a champion. I can remember even again locally watching on television Sugar Ray Leonard before he became welterweight champion. I can remember watching Thomas Hearns on free television before he became champion. So there was plenty of opportunity to see the boxer and to see them develop to get to the stage where they are. Today, the way I look at it is you basically have 1 or 2 boxers per division, maybe 3, that have the capacity to draw enough people to be in a special event, pay-per-view event situation. And so what happens is, now I think boxing today, they're looking at this saying, we don't really have the draw. Yes, Canelo can draw. That's how you get the Triple G Canelo rematch in the fight. But Triple G really can't draw on his own. Even when you look at somebody in the welterweight division who one could argue, I would make the argument, should not have the capacity to draw, should not have the capacity to be able to reach the matches, but he does. If you look at why Adrian Bronner is still, relevant in the context of boxing promotion, it's not because of his boxing skill. Although his resume is not as bad as we like to make it, where he's only really lost 2 fights. But the fact is, in a championship era, undefeated era, being one of the 2 or 3 best welterweights in his class, no, he's not. Yet, if somebody wanted to make money using pay-per-view, if somebody wanted to use money in a big fight component, his name would probably resonate in that conversation. Why? Because love him or hate him, he has the capacity to draw enough people to watch the fight to begin with. He has enough, brand marketing, however you want to look at it, whether you look at it as a level of buffoonery, whether you look at it as a level of marketing genius, however you look at it, he has that to where he signed a multi-fight deal with Mayweather Productions, and he's in the position to where, although he just lost to Pacquiao, he still is in the position to where if something comes up, and I want to say, for example, if Thurman beats Pacquiao, which I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen. As a matter of fact, I would say that's more of a toss-up than what people might imagine. And if the truth be told, Pacquiao, based on his styles make fights, as I believe it does, Thurman's style lends itself to some to some challenges with Pacquiao style of fighting. Let me just say that. I'm not saying that Thurman is not a very good fighter. I think he's a third tier in the welterweight division. And I don't know if his style shapes up to necessarily deal with Pacquiao on a points basis throughout a 12-round fight. We're going to see on July 20th. But my point is, Pacquiao, even in that fight, it's a championship fight, two big names. Obviously, Pacquiao, world class, two big names. We don't know how much revenue that fight's going to draw. That is not some mega fight. We don't know if that's going to be worth pay-per-view, what they're doing. They're still trying to sell that fight. So the idea that this era of boxing really comes down to, can you sell the fight versus is it a good fight? And the debate and the argument has been, which is better for boxing? From a business standpoint of view, I understand the idea that they need to sell the fight. Because you can have, i.e., perfect example, the Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, right? Two champions, undefeated. There's no reason why these two shouldn't be fighting. No reason why. To me, it could be a great fight. To me, it could be, I think, an epic fight, old school almost Hearn, Sugar Ray kind of deal. Here's the problem. As great as Terrence Crawford is, as great as Errol Spence has been, the reality of it is, though they have household, though they are good names in the boxing world, and though they are good names and on somewhat of a peripheral level, if you start just talking to people who have an interest in boxing, they're not household names. These are not people that are household in that context. And so the question is, what they're trying to do really is build up Crawford and Errol Spence brand so that it can be a mega fight. Right now, although we are talking about these two, who I think are arguably the two greatest in the welterweight division, we're talking about this, we don't think their brand is big enough in today's boxing. This would never happen in the golden era of boxing. Even when Oscar De La Hoya was kind of young, believing that, even when Bernard Hopkins, even when Roy Jones was leaving, was the second tier kind of behind Sugar Ray in that group, this fight would have been taking place because it would have been a belt associated that they would have had to fight. There would have been a commission that would have drawn them to where they would have had to fight. The promoters could promote it all they want. They can work it out. They can figure out how to make it happen. They can try to make it as big as they want to. But the commission controlled the belts at that time. Not that they don't control belts today, but they have less say-so. As a matter of fact, they almost have no say-so. Promoters and money and TV contracts, I think, are what drives it today. 301-429-9247. Is the business of boxing better today than it was then? My perspective is, I believe from a business standpoint of view, I think that for the upper echelon boxer, for the boxers that have, cachet, for the boxers that are, that are brandable, business is far better. For the boxer who's good, and I would even say great, or middle of the road, from how the structure of the business is working, unless they have some other promotional components independently that they can bring to the table, I don't view it as a better system for that boxer. And here is why. Because there is nothing that says that a champion or a great fighter has to fight you today. So the onus is on the person who has the cash, who has the king, who has the brand. This is, and Floyd Mayweather really shifted boxing to me in this context, and I call it the Floyd Mayweather era of boxing. Floyd basically, when he got to the point where he got to where now it was going to be promotionally based. Where it was going to move from being boxing based and promotionally based. Floyd basically was able to do that on the basis of, listen, I'm the draw. I'm the draw. I'm not going, and therefore the mandatories that you put in place, which is what most commissions had in place. In other words, if you are the champion, you mandatorily have to fight so-and-so, or you mandatorily have to fight so-and-so. Floyd said, if I'm doing the promotion, if I'm doing the contract, if I'm the one who's doing the draw, then I want to say who I want to fight. And by the way, I don't have the same criticism that other sports journalists and other people in the sports critics and industry has had as it relates to Floyd, because most people have stated that Floyd Mayweather fought most of his top opponents